Hello there, it is time for Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, 9M3 Son Meets Father. Jedu. Ridiculous. Funny though. Anyway, yes, so this is actually quite a poignant cue, and it's got sort of, rather interesting orchestration, especially at the beginning, with very unusual. Well, I guess it is very unusual for Williams in Star Wars pedal tones in all of the trombones. Yes, so we've got sort of that at the beginning, and then some other sort of little choice things as well. Sort of horns as six horns, the usual amount. I think trumpets are only 3 in this one, and then we've just got standard wind, the 3 flutes, 2 oboes, cor anglais, clarinets, with bass clarinet, bassoons, contra, 3 trumpets, as I said, 6 horns, 3 trombones, actually 4 trombones and a tuba, and then percussion, celeste, piano, strings, that sort of thing. And there's quite a sort of military aspect going on to this thing. We've got sort of 2 military drums, which go in right at the beginning, and they kind of go in basically up until the time where we see Luke, who's allowed himself to be captured. So this particular thing I've said is basically he confronts Darth Vader, his father. He sort of accepts the truth. Vader's sort of impressed that he's created his new lightsaber. Indeed, your skills are complete, that sort of thing. And the Emperor will show him he's his new master now, sort of thing. But Luke desperately tries to change his mind and suspects that he can sort of sense conflict within Vader. And it's interesting because harmonically there's also quite an interesting sort of mix, really, of varying things. Quite jazz-based, most of it as well. And also the original ending actually had Luke's theme, the main theme, and it's all sort of, chordal, quintal, that sort of thing, but it was replaced with this sort of section here, which seems to be, I guess, to do with the fact it runs into the next cue, and they needed, a joining moment for a link from this thing to the next cue. So that's probably what happened there. So we're going to kick off today with the very first bit. So we're in sort of B flat based. A lot of it is based on the Imperial March, like that. You see what I did there? So it's just the rearranged notes on the timpani. Should probably point that out there. And then we've got violins, trombones muted at this point, and then pedal tones of the trombones, which go down A flat, G flat as well. And an unusual chord here, B flat sus sharp 4, which is unusual because I don't see that often with Williams. We do see dyads though, and there we go. Basically, again, just sort of based off that sort of type of chord, sort of G flat major. But basically it's sort of B flat minor-ish, and it sort of shifts between the two. We've then got descending actual cluster, not necessarily octatonic. If I sort of go in, we've got all sorts of things, so it's not quite octatonic. And then we just got the addition of an A to the previous 3 chords, 3-note chord. We're then into F based, and then that is on the horns, and then the strings come in with their sort of ubiquitous unison at this point, and that links in nicely with a nice dominant pedal, dominant preparation to a cadence in A. So we have a sort of tertial shift from F into A. And then we've got block chordal triads, and then we've got this 0811 voicing, which is here. That sort of thing. Interestingly enough, don't forget also we've also got the trumpets which come in as well, which are all on mutes. So they're all in G minor. But then there's this major G sort of triad bit, but that's in the bass. So it's a sort of wrong note bass plus 8, but also it's a slash chord, mixed minor major scale, or indeed octatonic. You could think of it as that as well. those scales fit with this particular type of wrong note bass. We've then got an unusual change of harmony here. So he doesn't do all the time here just minor. If you see here, it looks minor, and then it suddenly shifts actually in the trumpets to an augmented chord, a sort of A flat augmented. But then we've got that sort of chord here. So let's just put that in. F minor major 7. And then D flat with a flat 6, C with a flat 6 as well, which sort of carries everything on. So I don't know whether that is the case. You see, I suspect actually, I'm not sure why that's a C natural, because it's the only chord that shifts from everything else. But then I then sort of think, well, actually, this is also not a minor chord, so we can't second guess it. So I said he might have copied it incorrectly, but actually he might not have done, and that was perhaps what Williams wanted. So I'm actually going to take that out and re-colorize that as black, because I'm not sure, basically, and who am I to say? Then we've got this contrapuntal passage after this bit. So basically bassoons join the lower strings at this point. And it's almost like a sort of a convergent progression. So it starts here. So it sort of converges. That goes down, and this goes up into B flat. At least the B flat's in the bass. However, we're actually in a sort of G flat. And then it shifts into A minor. We've then got a really interesting passage here. It's all sort of very jazz, basically, because it starts relatively sort of calm, and then it goes into that. And then it's really weird. I suspect that's a B, because Herb wrote a natural next to the C, but then wrote C's beforehand, which doesn't make any sense at all. Why would he write a natural for a C that's already been sounded earlier in the bar? It's really weird. I suspect it should have been a B, but they kept the C's in the recording. You can clearly hear that it's that, which is really weird. It should be that. Like that, but instead we've got this, which is really interesting. But also, I mean, it's kind of fitting, because that's the point where Vader, says, "Well, Obi-Wan once thought as you do." So it's a bit of sort of gnarl at that point. But I suspect in reality that's actually just a mistake that was then kept in the recording. We've then got a sort of another really weird chord here, sort of F minor but major, so that basically, and then add a ninth as well. With this, and again, I suspect that there's an error somewhere. I'm not sure whether that should be. I'm not sure that should be that. I think it should be there, because that would make more sense. But having both the G and the F is a bit weird. So one of them is wrong, but we don't know which wrong. I suspect the viola one is wrong, but who knows? It could have just been, again, we're not sure. So that's why I've said F minor major, but with an added ninth, which is that. So all of this is sort of characterised by these sort of major seventh type things, minor major chords, that sort of thing, add nines, and then we've got this sort of lovely retardation as well. So that's why I've called it that. It's an upwardly resolving suspension. Where we got just an F minor chord in first inversion. We then have the force fragment at this point as well. And I've put the add 2 in here because we definitely got F minor at that point. It's only shown on the harp. But it's interesting that there's no minor in any of the strings. You get this sort of rather interesting, quite sort of clear orchestration with the harp all in that sort of muddy middle register at that point, which is also covered in here, but not that extra note, interestingly. Although it does appear a bit later here. So he's sort of, you know, basically the harp is adding a little bit of colour into this section here, just above that moment. So it sort of fills things in rather nicely. What else? Yeah, something else I'm sure. Yeah, in the horns. Note how low they are. So it's interesting, but there's nothing else really happening. So, you know, it's not masked by anything at that point. But they are quite low in terms of where they sing. But interesting that there's nothing else there. So I think it sounds fine. So then we've got a little bit of sort of almost like a reply to the force. And then suddenly we've got this suspended cymbal, violas, and then an amazing octatonic collection of pitches. Gong swipe with super ball, suspended cymbal sort of gets into the roll. We've got this sort of you know, diminished fifth type of idea. And if we go in closely, so that's basically an octatonic T1, and then we've also got, sorry, octatonic T0, and then we've got an octatonic T1. It's a sort of almost like an alpha chord, really, and it's sort of similar to the top of the August chord. That's why I've called it that. But that's based on octatonic T1. But there we go. Whereas the top bit, A7 with a sharp 9, is actually based on octatonic T0. So we've got both octatonic collections in the same chord, which is why it sounds really pizzazzy. If I try this, let's just hear it on the piano. Just a sort of silly glissando there, doesn't it? And then this is where he sort of constructed his new lightsaber at that point. That's sort of when it comes on. That sort of bit. Interesting little, nice bit of orchestration mix with harp harmonics, which are going to sound an octave higher with the pits, which are done sharply in the violins. Then we got D-flat dyads, E-dyads, B-flat minor without the fifth, again dyad, and then we're ending up into a sort of E minor with a major seventh chord at that point. But also, not forgetting, we also have harmonics, which are going to sound 2 octaves above, like that. Like that. So it's a really extraordinary sort of extension at that point. So what do we have? In fact, well, we can ignore the G because it's already there. The D sharp is that major seventh. The A is an 11th, and that is a 9th as well. So we've got a sort of sharp 9, 11th type sort of thing. Lots and lots of extensions, basically, just not 13th or 6th. We've then got interesting sort of stopped horn moments, and then 3 flutes, really low, like that, which sort of cut through just about, just because of where they are in terms of register. It's written as a D sharp here, but it definitely sounds like it's a D in the horn. It's just that it's almost like a sort of aural illusion, basically, a sort of an optical illusion equivalent, where we actually hear a D natural rather than a D sharp, just because I think, everybody's stopping the horn. So we've then got a sort of interesting sort of more of a contrapuntal thing and post-tonal. So here, if I just sort of go out and just let you look at it at that point, it's quite interesting. So we've got this. At that point. It's really weird. And then I'm just sort of playing all the notes sort of collectively. It doesn't seem any relation at all. So G7 sharp 11, that's an A11 with a flat 5. Descending chromatic movement, all in the same, like that, but with D pedal all the way through. And then D flat against the D as well. And then this sort of bit here, flute 2 drops out and plays piccolo in a minute. So eventually D with a flat 6, like that, and then we're into E flat minor with a major 7th, but also with a sharp 4 as well. So again, if I sort of go in here, that's basically what it is. So E flat minor with a major 7, add sharp 4, just that chord complex. I don't think anything else is at that point. Then we've got a really interesting doubling of very high piccolo and bass clarinet 2 octaves below it, which is really interesting. Then we're back into our little 3/3s as well, a sort of interesting mix on this particular chord where we've got this still sounding. So we've got the sort of E flat, like that. So you can kind of argue it's almost, it's almost like a tritone sub, but with the actual dominant of D as well at the same time, because we've also got elements of E flat minor, sort of just about at that point as well, which is really interesting. So that takes us through to the Imperial March fragment, which is harmonised quite simply. And it does seem to change every time we've heard it. So this is a sort of G diminished, but then we've got almost sort of Death Starry from the very first film at that point. And it sort of repeats. And then there's this really weird bit at the end, sort of E flat minor with a major and add 6. So we got that. And then it just runs basically straight into the next cue at that point. Originally, as I said before, we had this going on instead. Like that, sort of really weird sort of type of sound. And again, it's very far removed from the next cue, so perhaps they changed it for that reason and just sort of rewrote that bit. I don't have any idea of whether that's true or not. We just don't know. So that's it, folks. That's where we are ending. And it's a nice cue. Sorry that it's taken so long to get it to you, but you know, as with all of these things, other elements of work have taken over somewhat, and wasn't able to get this done until quite recently. So anyway, I hope that's happy times, and I look forward to the next one. Thanks very much. Bye for now.